Matthew McConaughey is sitting alone in the African desert at 2 a.m., miles from civilization, staring up at a sky so filled with stars it looks like someone threw diamonds across black velvet. He's been walking for days, carrying nothing but water and a worn leather journal. In that moment of complete solitude, something profound happens. He pulls out that journal and writes a simple prayer. Show me how to love what I have before life shows me how I had everything to love. That moment reveals something most people never understand about finding meaning in chaos. Matthew McConaughey discovered this after decades of living what looked like the perfect life on the surface: fame, fortune, critical acclaim, yet feeling somehow empty inside, like he was playing a character even when the cameras stopped rolling. If you've ever felt like you're living someone else's definition of success, or if you've caught yourself going through the motions while your soul screams for something more authentic, what you're about to discover will change everything. This isn't just another celebrity memoir filled with Hollywood stories. This is about a man who stripped away everything he thought he needed to find what he actually was searching for all along. Poems and Prayers isn't a traditional book. It's a collection of late-night thoughts, desert wisdom, and hard-earned truths that McConaughey gathered during the most transformative periods of his life. These aren't polished Instagram quotes or motivational poster material. These are raw, honest conversations with himself, with God, with the universe, written in moments when pretense was impossible and truth was the only option. What makes this collection so powerful is that it captures a universal human experience, that restless feeling that there's something more, something deeper calling us, even when everything looks perfect from the outside. McConaughey's journey from a people-pleasing actor to someone who dared to disappoint others in order to honor himself is a roadmap for anyone who's ever felt trapped by their own success or paralyzed by the fear of letting others down. The desert teaches what the world cannot. After winning his Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club, Matthew McConaughey should have been on top of the world. Instead, he felt more lost than ever. The accolades felt hollow, the parties felt meaningless, and the constant noise of Hollywood success was drowning out something inside him that was desperately trying to speak. So he did something that shocked everyone in his world. He disappeared. Not to rehab, not to a spa retreat, but to the desert. Alone, with minimal supplies and maximum questions. This is where everything clicked for McConaughey. He realized that all his life he'd been so busy becoming who others wanted him to be that he'd never asked who he actually was when nobody was watching. Most people think solitude is about being alone, but McConaughey's discovery shows something completely different. True solitude isn't about isolation, it's about getting quiet enough to hear your own voice again. In those desert nights with no distractions, no phones, no mirrors reflecting back society's expectations, he began writing what would become the foundation of Poems and Prayers. The desert doesn't lie, he writes in one of his most powerful entries. It strips away everything unnecessary and shows you what remains. When you understand this, everything shifts. You realize that most of what we call problems are actually just noise, the chattering of a mind that's been conditioned to seek external validation instead of internal truth. The psychological truth underneath this is profound. We live in a world that's constantly telling us who we should be, how we should feel, what we should want. But the desert, whether it's a literal desert or the metaphorical desert of stepping away from the crowd, forces us to confront who we are when all those external voices fall silent. This explains why so many successful people feel empty despite having everything they thought they wanted. They've been so busy meeting everyone else's definition of success that they've never explored their own. McConaughey's desert experience wasn't about finding himself, it was about remembering who he'd always been before the world told him who to become. And that realization led him to something even more revolutionary, the understanding that authenticity isn't about perfection, it's about permission. The permission to be imperfect. One of the most striking poems in the collection is called Permission Slip, and it reads like a manifesto for imperfection. I give myself permission to be wrong, to change my mind, to disappoint you, to disappoint me, to be human instead of heroic. This wasn't just pretty words from McConaughey, this was a complete life revolution. Here was a man who'd spent decades trying to be the perfect son, the perfect actor, the perfect public figure, suddenly declaring war on perfectionism itself. But here's what's really happening underneath this permission slip. It's not about lowering standards, it's about raising consciousness. The story behind this poem is deeply personal. McConaughey talks about a conversation with his father where he finally admitted that he didn't want to take every role offered to him, didn't want to say yes to every opportunity, didn't want to be available to everyone all the time. His father's response surprised him. Son, saying no to the wrong things is how you say yes to the right things. Most people think boundaries are about keeping others out, but McConaughey's insight reveals something far more profound. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doorways. They're not about rejection, they're about selection. When you give yourself permission to disappoint some people, you give yourself the power to truly serve others. This psychological shift is massive. We're conditioned from childhood to believe that love is conditional, that we have to earn it by being good, by being convenient, by being what others need us to be. But authentic love, McConaughey discovered, can only exist when it's freely given and freely received, not when it's performed for approval. The prayers in this collection often return to this theme. Help me love people enough to tell them the truth, he writes, even when the truth is that I can't be who they want me to be. This isn't selfishness, this is spiritual maturity. It's understanding that the greatest gift you can give someone is your authentic self, not your people-pleasing performance. When McConaughey started saying no to romantic comedies, everyone in Hollywood thought he was committing career suicide. But by disappointing the industry's expectations, he created space for roles that actually mattered to him. The result? Dallas Buyers Club, True Detective, and a career renaissance that felt authentic instead of manufactured. This principle applies to every area of life. When you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you become something meaningful to the right people. And that understanding opens the door to perhaps the most powerful insight in the entire collection. The sacred in the ordinary. There's a prayer in the collection that McConaughey wrote while watching his son play in the backyard, and it captures something most of us miss completely. Thank you for disguising profound moments as ordinary Tuesday afternoons. This single line contains a truth that can transform how you experience every single day. McConaughey realized that we spend so much time waiting for life to happen, waiting for the big break, the perfect relationship, the ideal circumstances, that we miss the fact that life is happening right now in the mundane moments we dismiss as unimportant. This is where everything shifted for him. He began to see the sacred everywhere, in morning coffee, in his dog's unconditional excitement, in the way sunlight hit the kitchen table at exactly 3:47 p.m. Most people think spirituality is about grand gestures and mountaintop experiences, but McConaughey's discovery shows something completely different. The divine isn't hiding in some distant realm waiting for us to find it through elaborate rituals or perfect conditions. It's woven into the fabric of ordinary life, visible to anyone willing to pay attention. The psychological truth here is revolutionary. We live in a culture of delayed gratification that's morphed into delayed living. We tell ourselves we'll be happy when we lose the weight, when we get the promotion, when we find the right person, when we have enough money. But happiness isn't a destination, it's a practice. It's the discipline of finding wonder in what's already here. One of his most powerful poems describes washing dishes as a meditation. Each plate holds the memory of nourishment, each glass the echo of laughter, each fork the intimacy of sharing. When you understand this perspective, everything changes. Chores become ceremonies, routines become rituals, ordinary moments become opportunities for gratitude. This isn't positive thinking or forced optimism, it's conscious presence. McConaughey writes about learning to be fully where he is instead of mentally rehearsing where he's going or replaying where he's been. The present moment, he notes, is the only place where life actually exists. Everything else is just stories we tell ourselves. The science backs this up completely. Neuroscience shows that our brains are prediction machines, constantly trying to anticipate the future based on past patterns. But when we anchor ourselves in present moment awareness, we break free from those automatic patterns and open ourselves to possibilities we couldn't see before. This practice of sacred noticing led McConaughey to one of his most profound realizations about the nature of prayer itself. Prayer as conversation, not performance. Most of the prayers in McConaughey's collection would shock traditional religious sensibilities. They're not formal, polite requests to a distant deity. They're raw, honest conversations with the universe, filled with questions, doubts, gratitude, and sometimes even arguments. I'm not asking you to fix everything, he writes in one prayer. I'm asking you to help me understand why some things shouldn't be fixed. This reveals something revolutionary about McConaughey's spiritual journey. He stopped trying to impress God and started trying to connect with whatever force he sensed moving through his life. Prayer became less about getting what he wanted and more about understanding what he needed, less about controlling outcomes and more about trusting the process. The story behind many of these prayers is deeply personal. After his father's death, McConaughey went through a period of spiritual rebellion, angry at a universe that seemed arbitrary and unfair. Instead of pretending to have faith he didn't feel, he got honest about his doubts. I'm mad at you, he wrote in one prayer, and I don't know if that's okay, but it's true, and lying to you seems worse than being angry with you. Most people think prayer is about having the right words or the right attitude, but McConaughey's insight shows something completely different. Prayer is about radical honesty, bringing your whole self, including the parts you're not proud of, into conversation with something larger than yourself. It's not about performance, it's about presence. This shift transforms everything. When prayer becomes conversation instead of recitation, it becomes alive. When it becomes honest instead of perfect, it becomes powerful. McConaughey discovered that the universe can handle his doubts, his anger, his confusion, but it can't work with pretense. The psychological impact of this approach is profound. When you stop trying to be spiritually perfect and start being spiritually real, you tap into a source of strength that doesn't depend on having everything figured out. You discover that faith isn't about certainty, it's about trust. Trust that whatever you're going through has meaning, even when you can't see it yet. One prayer that particularly stands out reads, "Help me trust the timing of my life even when it makes no sense to my schedule." This captures the essence of spiritual maturity, the ability to hold your plans lightly while holding your purpose firmly. And this understanding of prayer as authentic dialogue opened McConaughey's eyes to a truth about creativity that changed how he approached his entire career. Creativity as surrender, not control. One of the most surprising elements of poems and prayers is how many of the entries came to McConaughey in dreams, during meditation, or in those liminal moments between sleep and waking. He describes creativity not as something he does, but as something he receives. "I don't write the poems," he explains, "I catch them." This shift from forcing creativity to allowing creativity revolutionized not just his writing, but his entire approach to acting and life. Instead of trying to manufacture inspiration, he learned to create conditions where inspiration could find him. Instead of pushing for results, he learned to prepare thoroughly and then surrender to what wanted to emerge. The story behind his most acclaimed performances reveals this principle at work. For Dallas Buyers Club, instead of trying to become Ron Woodroof, McConaughey emptied himself and let the character inhabit him. He lost 47 pounds not just for the physical transformation, but to create space, literally and metaphorically, for something authentic to emerge. Most people think creativity is about having great ideas, but McConaughey's discovery shows something completely different. Creativity is about getting out of your own way. It's about quieting the controlling mind that thinks it knows what should happen and trusting the deeper intelligence that knows what needs to happen. This principle applies far beyond artistic endeavors. In business, in relationships, in parenting, the most powerful moments often come when we stop trying to control outcomes and start trusting process, when we prepare thoroughly and then hold our expectations lightly. The psychological truth underneath this is profound. Our culture worships control, but control is often the enemy of flow. Control comes from fear that things won't work out, that we're not enough, that we need to force life to give us what we want. But surrender comes from trust that we're part of something larger, that our genuine efforts matter, that the universe is more creative than our limited imaginations. McConaughey writes about learning to cooperate with grace instead of trying to manufacture it. This doesn't mean becoming passive, it means becoming responsive. It means showing up fully for your part while trusting that forces beyond your control are handling the rest. One poem captures this beautifully. "I plant the seeds, water them daily, pull the weeds I can see, and then trust the soil, the sun, the rain, and the mystery of growth to do what only they can do." This is creativity as collaboration with life itself. And this understanding of creative surrender led McConaughey to perhaps his most important realization about the relationship between success and fulfillment. Success versus fulfillment. There's a poem in the collection called Enough that cuts straight to the heart of modern anxiety. How much is enough? When do I have enough? When am I enough? The questions that torture us until we realize we're asking the wrong person. This insight emerged from McConaughey's most successful period, when he had everything he thought he wanted but felt spiritually bankrupt. The revelation came during a conversation with his mother, who asked him a simple question, "Are you happy, son?" He realized he'd been so focused on being successful that he'd forgotten to check whether that success was actually serving his happiness. Success, he discovered, is about meeting external standards. Fulfillment is about honoring internal truth. Most people think success and fulfillment are the same thing, but McConaughey's journey reveals something completely different. Success is what happens when you excel at someone else's game. Fulfillment is what happens when you have the courage to play your own game, even if you're not sure you'll win. This distinction changed everything for him. Instead of asking what will make me more successful, he started asking what will make me more myself. Instead of pursuing opportunities that looked impressive, he started pursuing opportunities that felt aligned. The result was a career renaissance that brought both critical acclaim and personal satisfaction. The psychological principle here is crucial. We live in a comparison culture that's constantly showing us other people's highlight reels and asking us to measure our behind-the-scenes reality against their curated perfection. But comparison is the thief of joy, and more importantly, it's based on incomplete information. You're comparing your internal experience to someone else's external presentation. McConaughey learned to define success on his own terms. Success is being able to look in the mirror and like who's looking back. This isn't about lowering standards, it's about choosing the right scorecard. It's about measuring your life by how authentic you're being, not by how impressive you appear. One of his most powerful prayers reads, "Help me want what I have while I work for what I want, and help me remember that having what I want won't mean anything if I'm not someone I respect in the process of getting it." This captures the essence of sustainable success, success that feeds your soul instead of depleting it. This insight led him to a final understanding that ties together everything in the collection. The courage to disappoint. The final major theme in poems and prayers might be the most important, the courage to disappoint others in order to honor yourself. McConaughey writes extensively about learning to say no, setting boundaries, and choosing authenticity over approval. The people who love you for who you pretend to be, he notes, don't actually love you, they love your performance. This realization came at great cost. When McConaughey decided to stop taking romantic comedy roles, many people in his life were confused, disappointed, even angry. Agents dropped him, friends questioned his sanity, and the industry labeled him difficult. But in disappointing those people, he discovered something profound. The people who truly mattered supported his authenticity, even when they didn't understand his choices. The story that captures this perfectly involves his decision to take a 2-year break from acting altogether. Everyone called it career suicide. His business manager said he was throwing away millions. His publicist said he was damaging his brand. But McConaughey knew that continuing to take roles that felt wrong would damage something more important than his brand. It would damage his soul. Most people think we need everyone's approval to be happy, but McConaughey's experience reveals something completely different. We need our own approval to be at peace. External approval is nice, but it's not necessary. Internal approval is both necessary and sufficient. The psychological truth here is liberating. We spend enormous amounts of energy trying to manage other people's opinions of us, but we have very little actual control over what others think. What we do have control over is our own integrity, the alignment between who we are and how we live. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or inconsiderate. It means becoming discerning. It means caring more about being authentic than being liked, more about being true than being popular. It means understanding that you can't please everyone, but you can honor everyone by being genuine in your interactions. McConaughey's prayer about this struggle is deeply moving. Give me the strength to disappoint people when disappointing them is the most loving thing I can do for them and for me. This is spiritual maturity, understanding that enabling someone's unrealistic expectations of you isn't kindness, it's cowardice. The courage to disappoint others is ultimately the courage to be yourself, and that courage, McConaughey discovered, is the foundation of every meaningful relationship and every authentic achievement. Picture Matthew McConaughey back in that African desert, staring up at those diamonds scattered across black velvet, writing that simple prayer, "Show me how to love what I have before life shows me how I had everything to love." That moment of radical honesty and complete solitude became the seed of everything that followed: the career renaissance, the authentic relationships, the inner peace that no external achievement could provide. That's the power of what McConaughey discovered through these poems and prayers. You now understand that authenticity isn't about perfection. It's about permission to be human, to make mistakes, to disappoint others in order to honor yourself. You understand that the sacred isn't hiding in some distant realm, but woven into the fabric of ordinary moments, visible to anyone willing to pay attention. You understand that prayer isn't about having the right words, but about bringing radical honesty to your conversation with life itself. You've discovered that creativity flows through surrender, not control, and that success without fulfillment is just elaborate emptiness. Most importantly, you've learned that the courage to disappoint others is really the courage to be yourself, and that courage is the foundation of everything meaningful. But knowing isn't enough. The real magic happens when you start writing your own poems and prayers, not perfect, polished pieces meant to impress others, but raw, honest conversations with yourself and whatever you sense moving through your life. When you start giving yourself permission to be imperfect, to change your mind, to disappoint people when disappointment is the most authentic response you can offer. This is your moment to stop performing your life and start living it, to stop waiting for perfect conditions and start finding the sacred in Tuesday afternoons. To stop asking the world to tell you who you should be and start discovering who you actually are when nobody's watching. The desert is waiting, not necessarily a literal desert, but that space of solitude and honesty where your true voice can finally be heard above the noise of everyone else's expectations. That's where your real life begins.